us. All right, Vaughn, you're just back from Paris, where you were covering Donald Trump. What are your sources in Washington telling you tonight about this Wray announcement? I mean, it's obviously exactly what Trump wanted.
And it is exactly what he forecasted. Look, ever since 2019, I think we have to go back to when Chris Wray went and defended the DOJ IG reports that said that the Russia investigation was warranted into Donald Trump, his campaign, and the extent to which they may have colluded with Russian nationals. And at that point in time, just 2 years after he nominated Chris Wray to that post, that is when he spoke out and said that Chris Wray should not be atop the FBI. 2 years later, he then went and called the January 6 attackers a form of domestic terrorism. The next year, the Mar-a-Lago estate of Donald Trump was a search warrant was executed by the FBI, and Donald Trump went on the attack against Chris Wray. And so all of this was leading up to the moment. What do my sources from Trump world say? This is exactly what Donald Trump promised. It was to go and rid out the deep state that undermined his
But remember,
first
the deep
term in
state,
office.
he appointed Chris Wray.
Absolutely. You are not wrong at all, Stephanie, here. But this is a second go at it, right? This is a second go at backfilling actual loyalists, right? He did say Chris Wray in 2017 had impeccable credentials, was Donald Trump's own terminology to describe his pick at the time. This go around, though, he is going in and picking somebody who has questionable credentials, but somebody who is going to go and undo what he says
then let's
his
stay
first
on
FBI
that.
did.
Because during the Trump transition, the co-head of the transition at the time, Howard Lutnick, didn't say the top qualification to be part of the Trump administration was impeccable credentials. Numero uno was loyalty to Trump. And is this Christopher Wray stepping down, someone like Kash Patel moving in, the likes of Pete Hegseth and others, the framed portrait of Trump 2.0, DJT first?
Yes. I mean, I guess I can expand on that. I mean, one thing I do want to point out, though, that contrary to your articulation, Trump did say in his True Social post, Kash Patel is the most qualified nominee to lead the FBI in the agency's history. And so there you have the word of the president-elect, which obviously means something. So, yeah, I mean, yes, I think that's true. I think it is very much the case that we have seen this pattern across the proposed nominations and across all the staffing decisions he's making, that loyalty is a predicate for what it is that he's doing. We've seen these reports, including from the New York Times last weekend, that there is an actual test that is being applied to people. How do you feel about 2020? Was it stolen or not? That people have to answer in order to be able to be given one of these positions. But I think at the end of the day, look, if you're Christopher Wray, all else aside, why do you want to go through? I get that he is someone who has served the country, right? Like, I understand that. Why do you want to go through that?
Yeah, he's also a human being.
Exactly. Like, now he can spend the next month trying to find a job, figuring all this stuff out. He doesn't have to go through having Donald Trump dump on him for the next month, right? He gets to get out of it. I think that aspect of it can somewhat get lost in this conversation.
Hayes, most people don't know who Christopher Wray is. They don't know who Kash Patel is. And frankly, they're living their lives and they don't care.
Yeah.
But just lay out for us, and I know this is a difficult assignment, the differences between these two men who are going to be, Kash Patel is now going to be running a law enforcement agency with an $11 billion budget and 35,000 employees.
And connections around the world and so many ties to the investigations going on around the country right now. Like, Christopher Wray was named, he's one of a long line of Republicans with impeccable law enforcement credentials who have been named to be FBI director. He is someone who believes in the rule of law. He's someone who, for all of his, whatever faults he has had as FBI director, some cases where he has leaned in harder than he needed to, or others where he's gotten in trouble politically, such as the Mar-a-Lago investigation. He has done he has followed the law. There are no scandals in Chris Wray's past that you have seen from past FBI directors like, say, Louis Freeh back during the Clinton administration. What you have in Kash Patel, though, is someone who has been an opportunist from day one, who saw at the start of the Trump administration, when he was just an Intelligence Committee staffer under Devin Nunes, saw an opportunity to say, I can make this work for me, and has worked his way up through basically winnowing his way in and getting on Trump's side. Whatever scandal Trump was under, be it the Russia scandal, the Ukraine impeachment, the last few months of his administration where he was trying to steal election. Kash Patel's been right there to capitalize on it. Chris Wray has never sold wine with his name on it. Kash Patel, very much in Trump vein, has. Like, he's
Children's book.
Children's books.
Right.
Like, Kash Patel is someone who is a grifter, first and foremost, who will be leading the FBI in Trump's name. Whether or not he fully believes all of the deep state garbage that he's putting out there doesn't matter. He's going to do it because Trump believes it, and he wants to stay on Trump's good side so he can continue the grift.
David, what does this say about other positions that have terms that go beyond a presidency? I don't know, something like the Fed chair, right? Jay Powell's seat is not up for another year. But could he face a ton of public pressure like Christopher Wray just did and kind of get pushed to step down? He has already said, no, I will not. But things could be changing.
I think it's fascinating to look at them in complement and look at how Jay Powell has approached this so far, because he has taken the position that he is going to fight this. The law is on his side and the precedent is on his side, and the president-elect doesn't have the right or the ability to remove him from that office. I think we've seen in recent days something of a cooling off from the president-elect in that interview with Kristen Welker over the weekend. He said he doesn't have plans to remove him. But I think, to your point, it's not, could we see a lot of pressure applied to him? We're going to see it. And something that Donald Trump has said over and over again is it's well within his right to weigh in on matters of monetary policy and economic policy and try to make that known to the Federal Reserve. So we're seeing him push norms in that way. Again, I think that it's worth looking at both of these things side by side in complement. I think that Jay Powell, seems to have a commitment to doing this for the sake of the institution. As a public servant, I'm not casting any shade at Chris Wray for his decision, but I think that Jay Powell, through the comments that he's made at press conferences and interviews over these last many months, is acknowledging the fact more in his manner than directly that this is going to be a tough row for him to hoe over these next few months.
Kash Patel has said in the past he'd like to see journalists in jail. It wasn't that many months ago Donald Trump said he'd like to see Mark Zuckerberg in jail. And today we heard that Meta, obviously the Facebook, essentially, Mark Zuckerberg's company donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration. How unusual is that? Do lots of companies do that come inauguration time? Because Mark Zuckerberg didn't last time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that inaugural committees pass the hat around and collect money. I think what's interesting about this is just the about face that we've seen from the tech community sort of attitudinally toward Donald Trump. And there were difficult relationships, shall we say, between a lot of these executives and Donald Trump the first time around. And we've seen in recent weeks, really, kind of an overt reversal on the part of many of these tech titans, down to the fact that they all kind of sent out congratulatory tweets that seem to come from the same hymnal. They seem to sing from the same book. So I think this is just another example of that.
Donald Trump has a list, and he's checking it twice, and he wants to know who congratulated him. He's also invited Xi Jinping to attend the inauguration. We have never had a foreign world leader attend an inauguration, certainly not the head of a communist country. How big of a deal is it?
I think it would be a big deal if he came in part, I mean, just from a logistics standpoint, right? But I mean, I think that what this is, if I can sort of play armchair psychologist, which is, you know, to some extent why I'm here, I think that what we're seeing here is Donald Trump, who has long sort of assumed that the presidency was not a mantle given to him by the people, but rather something that was his birthright almost. He is trying to manifest this idea that he is America embodied, right? And that he is. All of these other world leaders understand that he's transactional, right? We saw Justin Trudeau come down to Mar-a-Lago. Yeah, absolutely. And so this is him saying, here is how you bolster my power by showing up and watching me be coronated. And then this is one of the ways in which you can ingratiate yourself. I think this is fundamentally transactional and predicated on the idea that he values himself over the presidency, as he always has.
I know I'm out of time, but I have to ask this question. All these business leaders who are saying congratulations, some who are going down there, you might not like it, but do you blame them for it?
Yes.
Tell me why. You knew I was asking you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
Because I think that the idea of, oh, we don't want to get in trouble. We want to make sure that we stay on his good side because we are afraid of what he's going to do with the regulatory power of the United States. We're afraid what he's going to do with tariffs, not give us an exemption that we're going to be looking for when he puts this crazy idea into place. But he isn't president yet. He hasn't done any of these things yet. If they were going to try and be reactive and say, like, oh, this has happened, we are going to try to fix it, that'd be different.
I'm not defending them. But let's say I'm one of them, and I would say to you, well, my job is to please my employees, my customers, and my shareholders. And in doing so, I need to make sure I'm in good favor with the president because I don't want to get slapped with regulations or tariffs. What would you say to that argument?
To that argument, I would say if your shareholders really are worried, or if they're really concerned about how this is going to play out on them, I would love for them to go around the table at the next board meeting and ask, how did you guys then, who'd you donate to? If you were really worried about what would happen if this guy won, why did you help or not try to stop him from getting in? If you were so worried that he was going to break the rule of law and come after us and affect us and our businesses because we depend on the rule of law to actually get things done.